It's 1983. You're maybe 10 years old and your dad takes you into the bank. Not the branch with the toaster ovens on the counter, the real one downtown with the marble floor that made your shoes echo. He talks to a man in a tie for 20 minutes about something you don't understand yet. And on the walk home, he says one thing that sticks with you for the next 40 years. Nobody's going to explain this to you. You just have to find out the hard way, same as I did. You didn't know it then, but that sentence became the operating manual for your whole financial life. Every rule you've learned since, the fine print, the fees nobody mentioned, the form that was due before you knew it existed. You learned it the same way he did, after the fact. There's one number sitting in your Medicare paperwork right now that works exactly the same way. And for some people, it's already cost them over $1,000 a year, without a single letter, a single warning, a single heads up before it happened. One honest note before we get into it. I'm not a lawyer or your financial advisor, and none of this is personal advice for your specific situation. It's just the kind of thing our generation was never handed on a silver platter, so you can walk in already knowing the right questions to ask. Here's the part that doesn't make sense at first. You'd think Medicare premiums go up the way everything else does, a little at a time as your income creeps higher. That's not what happens. There's a line, an actual dollar amount, and if your income sits $1 below it, you pay the standard premium, same as everyone else. Cross it by a single dollar. Not 1,000, not 100, $1, and you don't owe a little more. You owe the entire next tier for the whole year. Say you're a single filer and your income for the year lands at $108,999. You pay the standard Medicare premium, no surcharge at all. Now say it lands at $109,001 instead. $2 different. Nothing that would change your life in any other context. That $2 difference costs you $1,148 for the year. Not gradually, not phased in. All at once, the moment you cross the line. And that's just the first line. There are 4 more above it, and they don't get gentler. They get steeper. Cross the next threshold, and you're not looking at another $1,148. You're looking at nearly $2,900 a year. Keep climbing, and it's over $4,600, then over $6,200. At the very top tier, a single person is paying almost $6,940 a year, above and beyond the standard premium, just for where their income happened to land on a form filed 2 years earlier. Same mechanism every time. $1 over the line, and the entire next tier applies for the whole year. Now, to be fair, this doesn't happen to most people. Only somewhere around 7 or 8% of Medicare beneficiaries end up paying any version of this surcharge. But that number isn't shrinking, and the premiums underneath it aren't standing still either. The standard Part B premium alone jumped almost 10% in a single year recently. So the odds of this being background noise for your specific retirement are lower than you'd like, especially once we get into what actually triggers it. And here's the part that makes this personal, not just interesting. The decision that pushes people over that line usually isn't a mistake at all. It's something they were told to do, something a financial advisor or a tax preparer or their own common sense recommended years ago, long before anyone mentioned this rule existed. So hang on to this question because we're going to answer it properly. Have you ever done everything right with your money, followed the advice, made the responsible choice, and still gotten hit with a bill you never saw coming? Because if you have, you're about to find out exactly why. So, what actually counts toward that line? This is where it gets uncomfortable, because it's not just your salary or your pension. Medicare uses something called MAGI, and it's not the same number your accountant uses for your tax bracket. It's your adjusted gross income, plus one thing most people don't expect: tax-exempt interest. Read that again. Tax-exempt. The municipal bonds you bought specifically because someone told you they were the safe, smart, tax-free move. the interest from those still counts toward this line. It doesn't touch your tax bill. It absolutely touches this one. Here's the thing I keep noticing about how our generation was taught to handle money. So much of what we were told was safe was designed around one set of rules, income tax, without anyone mentioning there was a second, completely different set of rules waiting on the other side, tied to Medicare instead of the IRS. Nobody was lying to you. They just weren't thinking about this line because most advisors barely talk about it either. Think about what that means in real terms. Someone holding a modest portfolio of municipal bonds throwing off a few $1,000s a year in interest, money they were told wouldn't touch their tax bill, could be sitting closer to that Medicare line than their tax return alone would ever suggest. Their 1040 looks fine. Their MAGI tells a different story. And Munis are just one item on a list. There's a longer one. Things that count toward this number that you would never guess belong there. We're coming back to that list in a few minutes, and some of it is going to surprise you more than the bonds did. Now, if you're married, there's a piece of this that gets bigger, not smaller. Medicare doesn't charge this surcharge per household. It charges it per person. So if you and your spouse are both on Medicare and you both cross into that same tier, that $1 mistake isn't $1,148 anymore. It's $1,148 each, $2,297 combined, from a single dollar of extra income on a joint tax return. Picture it concretely. You take your RMD this year, same as always, and your spouse takes theirs too. Two separate withdrawals, same tax return, same household. If that combined income tips you both over the line, you don't get one bill in the mail. You get two. Same amount, same reason, addressed to two different names in the same house. And think about what that actually means. This usually isn't one spouse's decision anymore. It's a joint one. One person converts a retirement account, or one person sells a property that's in both names, and the bill lands on both of you separately at the same time. The kind of decision that felt like it only affected one line on your tax return quietly turns into two identical bills arriving together. So here's that list I promised. The things that push people over the line that almost nobody sees coming. Because every one of them looks like a responsible financial decision, not a mistake. Start with the one that hits almost everyone eventually. Your required minimum distribution. Once you turn 73, the government makes you start pulling money out of your retirement accounts, whether you need it or not. And that withdrawal counts as ordinary income, straight into this calculation. You didn't choose to spend it. You didn't even choose to take it. The law required it, and it still counts. Then there's the Roth conversion. Probably the single most common trigger because it's also some of the best advice out there. Converting a traditional account to a Roth is often smart long-term because future withdrawals come out tax-free. But the conversion itself raises your income in the year you do it, even though the money you'll pull out later never will be taxed again. Good long-term move, expensive short-term surprise. Selling a home or a rental property you've held for years, same story. The gain from that sale doesn't spread out over time. It lands entirely in the year you sold, spiking your income for that 1 year only, sometimes enough to push you over a line you didn't even know was there. Even something as ordinary as a cost of living increase on a pension can do it, if you're sitting close enough to the threshold already. A raise that's meant to help you keep up with inflation can be the very thing that tips you over. And if you inherit a traditional IRA from a parent or a spouse, the required distributions from that inherited account count too. Grief and a tax surprise in the same year. One more thing worth knowing, quickly. If you're on a Medicare Advantage plan instead of original Medicare, this still applies to you. A lot of people assume Advantage plans are private enough to sidestep this. They're not. So, look back at that list. An RMD you're required to take. A Roth conversion your advisor recommended. A property sale you'd been planning for years. None of those feel like mistakes while you're making them. And here's where it gets almost unfair. The fix most people assume exists. for exactly this situation doesn't actually apply to any of them. One more piece worth pulling out on its own, especially if you spent your career in government or union work. This surcharge has two parts, one tied to your Part B premium and a separate one tied to Part D, your drug coverage. And that Part D piece doesn't get folded into your plan's bill. Medicare charges it to you directly, on its own. Here's why that catches federal and union retirees specifically. A lot of them have their Part D premium covered, in whole or in part, by their old employer's retiree plan. So the assumption is understandable. My former employer handles that. I'm covered. But the surcharge doesn't go through the employer at all. It comes straight from Medicare, separately, regardless of what your old employer is paying on your behalf. The coverage you earned doesn't touch this bill. Here's where this gets stranger, and it matters more than almost anything else in this video. You might think the bill you're paying right now, this year, in 2026, is based on what you're earning right now. It's not. Medicare looks backward. Your 2026 premium is based on your 2024 tax return, the one you filed last year for the year before that. That's not a coincidence or a delay. It's how the system is built, on a 2-year look back, every single time. Which means whatever income decision you make this year, in 2026, the Roth conversion, the property sale, the large withdrawal, it doesn't show up as a Medicare bill this year or even next year. It shows up in 2028, 2 full years from now. Sit with that for a second. You think the bill you're paying today is a bill for today's decisions. It's actually a bill for a version of you, 2 years younger, who made a choice that felt completely disconnected from Medicare at the time. And once that 2-year window closes, you can't go back and undo it. The year is locked. The only way out, in very specific circumstances, is a formal appeal, which is exactly what we need to talk about next, because most people assume it covers more than it actually does. So there is an appeal. It's a real form, SSA 44, officially called a life-changing event appeal, and it exists specifically so Medicare can recalculate your premium using more recent income instead of that 2-year-old number. But here's the part that catches people off guard. The form only recognizes 8 specific life events. Things like retirement or reducing your work hours, marriage, divorce, the death of a spouse, losing a pension, losing income-producing property, or an employer settlement. That's the entire list. Notice what's not on it. A Roth conversion isn't a qualifying event. Neither is a capital gain from selling a property. Both of those are considered voluntary income, a choice you made, not a life change that happened to you, which means the exact decisions that most often push people over that line in the first place are, in most cases, decisions the appeal was never designed to fix. And even when someone does have a real qualifying event, the appeal isn't a guarantee. From what's been reported by advocacy groups like the Medicare Rights Center, and I want to be clear, this is reported, not an official government figure, something like half of these appeals get delayed or denied, usually over paperwork, not because the person didn't deserve the adjustment. If this feels familiar, it's because it is. This is the generation that watched a parent's pension quietly shrink or vanish in a merger nobody explained. The generation that watched 2008 take a chunk of a 401k that was supposed to be untouchable, with no warning letter first either. We learned a long time ago that the safety net rarely comes with a user manual. You find out what it actually covers and what it doesn't. Only after you've already needed it, usually standing in line at an office that closes at 4. This is one more version of that same lesson. Not a new one, just a new form, with a new number on it. One more layer of this worth knowing, especially if your filing status has ever changed later in life, through divorce, or after losing a spouse. If you're married but filing separately, this entire structure compresses. Instead of the gradual staircase we just walked through, there are only 3 tiers, and the very first one starts at the exact same $109,001 mark as before. Except this time, crossing it doesn't bump you to a modest first-tier surcharge. It jumps you almost straight to what would otherwise be one of the highest tiers on the chart. So, If a filing status change ever lands on top of an income change, say a divorce finalizing the same year as a property sale, or a spouse's passing the same year an RMD kicks in, this is the version of the rule that catches people the hardest because it looks like a small paperwork detail and behaves like anything but. So where does that leave you? Not powerless, not overwhelmed, just informed in a way most people your age aren't yet. And that's worth something. 3 things, concretely, from everything we've walked through. First, know your actual MAGI, not just your taxable income. If you hold municipal bonds, that tax-exempt interest is quietly part of the number that matters here, even though it's invisible on your regular tax bill. The same way your dad probably never knew the fine print on whatever that man in the tie had him sign. Second, if you're planning a Roth conversion, a property sale, or timing an RMD, look at where that decision lands relative to these thresholds before you make it, not after. Whatever you decide this year won't show up as a Medicare bill for 2 years. So the window to plan is now, while it still feels like it doesn't matter yet. And third, know exactly what that appeal can and can't do for you. If you do have one of those 8 qualifying events, retirement, a lost pension, a spouse's death, you have 60 days from the date on your official IRMAA determination letter to file the SSA 44 and ask for a recalculation. Miss that window, and the door closes for the year. And if you're not on Social Security yet, that surcharge doesn't just quietly go away. Medicare bills you directly for it through a separate form. It doesn't disappear just because it's less visible. None of this is a system built against you. It's a system that was never explained to you, the same way so much of it never was. Your dad walked home from that bank and told you nobody was going to explain it, that you just have to find out the hard way, same as he did. He wasn't wrong about how things worked back then, but you don't have to find this one out the hard way. You already know it right now, 2 years before the bill would ever land in your mailbox. That's the entire difference. If any of these triggers ever caught you off guard, an RMD, a pension increase, a property sale, you didn't connect to any of this, tell me which one in the comments. I'd bet you're not the only one who didn't see it coming until it already happened.